Great, welcome. I hope everybody had a good lunch. Are you still awake? Okay, good. Good to know. Normally, if the lunch is too good, then don't have much of an attendance. Good afternoon, and welcome to the first afternoon session this afternoon, this very important period in the face of Ethernet, having covered 40 years of Ethernet. My job this afternoon really is to bring to you a really esteemed and I would say powerful panel of speakers from the networking industry, specifically from the Ethernet networking industry, and you'll hear from them in a minute. Let me first start by quickly introducing the panelists, and let me get to the right slide. All right, so if you don't, folks wouldn't mind, just raise your hand when I introduce you. So Mike Banic, VP Marketing with HP Networking. Mike, welcome.
Thank you.
Steve Collen, VP Enterprise Marketing with Juniper Networks. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you.
Sachin Gupta, Senior Director, Enterprise Networking, Cisco. Welcome, Sachin. And Arpit Joshipura, VP Product Management and Marketing, Dell Networking. We know, Arpit, that you come from Force 10. You've had senior product management and marketing roles.
Yeah,
welcome.
Thanks.
So without further ado, I know we have a very short capsule of a window to get our message out in terms of where Ethernet fits within enterprise networking, so I'll just get started. I'll spend just a few minutes providing my perspective on the Ethernet market itself and where it's come from and where it's going, and then we'll get right into the panel. And at the end, like some of the other sessions, we'll try and keep some time for you for audience Q&A, just to make it interesting, just in case these folks have not provided you with enough of a debate, enough fodder, if you will, for you to make this interesting. So very quickly, where is Ethernet today? If you see the Ethernet market, the broader enterprise market in 2013 is at $42.4 billion per IDC's forecast. And that includes all enterprise networking technologies combined. And you can see from this slide on the right, the table tells you what are the various technologies that are included with enterprise networking. The key aspect of this that I do want to point out is Ethernet is a core technology for each one of these enterprise networking technologies. So much so that it garners nearly 47% share of the broader worldwide networking market. In fact, some of the other adjacent technologies, you might even consider them really layered on top of Ethernet. For example, wireless LAN. We all look and live our lives with Wi-Fi today, which certainly rides on top of Ethernet. I would call it, sister technology. But nevertheless, the point is that Ethernet is a core technology. Just layer 2, 3 Ethernet is a core technology in almost all enterprise shops today. Having looked at 2013, I want to actually walk you through a little bit of memory lane. I don't have 40 years of history here, but I do want to share with you. I think we got data from 1995, so surprising that we still got it. This is end user spending on Ethernet from 1995 to date to 2013. You'll see this market has grown in terms of users, end users and IT managers, network managers, spending on their infrastructure and how that market has grown. You'll see a few bumps along the way, but generally it's been a great ride for the last 25 years or so that we've been able to measure it. The next part I want to talk about is look at Ethernet by speed. I thought you might find this data very interesting as well. The red line is gigabit Ethernet that we all know that's been, the backbone of the enterprise networks, especially larger enterprise networks for many years. And that market, again, you see a little bit of a bump in 2009, largely macroeconomic issues, but it stayed, held its course. The blue line going up all the way is 10 gig. No question that 10 gig will actually, we expect at IDC that it'll take over by 2016. Actually, that'll be a market size larger than gigabit Ethernet. And you also see at the bottom right, 40 gig as well, ramping up literally like a hockey stick. So that's as far as the speeds and feeds. I also wanted to segment the market for you in terms of data center versus non-data center. So the yellow line is data center. No question, we know that's the hot growing market for Ethernet, and largely driven by 10 gig and 40 gig of late, growing very, very fast. The one in red, though, is campus Ethernet, largely. There's a little bit of service provider, but I really wanted to segment data center versus non. So actually, yeah, it's a relatively flatter line, but significantly higher market than the data center market. So I know many of us focus these days on, and especially many industry analysts like myself, and we drink our own Kool-Aid and say it's the data center to focus on, but let's not forget the campus. The next piece that I want to talk about really is what's happening with network workloads. At the end of the day, they will determine where we find value in Ethernet. And I've got a long laundry list here. I don't want to go into each one of these, but I want to basically share that these are some of the workloads that we see end users and IT managers being most concerned about. Some are concerned more about videos, some might be concerned about the virtual desktop, others might be concerned more about security, but at the end of the day, they are thinking in terms of the network, specifically the layer 2, 3 network, and finding ways to evangelize and make it work for the needs of the business. The linkage between your business applications and the Ethernet network has never been greater. And that's what is driving what's happening today. So without further ado, let me move to the topics for discussion that we as a panel will walk through over the next 20 minutes. So are you guys ready for some rapid fire questions, guys?
Sure. Absolutely. Sure.
Great. Looking forward to it. And I'm sure the audience can't wait to get your views on some of these. So I have the honor of having picked some of the topics. The speakers had not seen these before. I will vouch for that. I thought some of these topics were going to be of primary interest to many of us, looking at where are we today with Ethernet in the enterprise and where are we going. So we'll try and address it to some extent where we are today, status quo, but really where we are going. So let me start first with the mobile edge. We know BYOD has been a hot topic in the last few years. So where exactly do the lines of mobility and Ethernet, your wired network, where do they intersect and where is that going? Who wants to start? Okay, Steve.
I'll say that they intersect at the management layer. So I think the key criteria moving forwards is a management platform that can handle both wired and wireless infrastructures. That single pane of glass will be a definer in the marketplace. Now, I think it's interesting to consider, however, who will provide that management interface. Will it be vendors like us, or will it be cloud-based provided by some other kind of service provider?
Right, Mike.
So one of the things I want to touch on is, first of all, HP provides multi-vendor management for a lot of customers in the enterprise space. And we do that with products that come out of HP software, but we also provide a lot of reach management for the network for our own products, and that includes a lot of third-party vendor products. And one of the things we've learned about BYOD is you can solve a lot of problems for customers quite easily in the network. I agree with Steve. the intersection point is at the management plane, because things like BYOD and mobility isn't just about the smartphone or the tablet, but also about the laptop. So providing that single consistent policy enforcement based on the identity of the user, regardless of how they connect and wherever they go, is important. And sorting out problems that could, right now only be solved with things like mobile device management in that single pane of glass can bring about a great economic benefit. It brings about simplification, and that's really the core of our strategy at HP.
All right, Arpit?
Yeah, so I think the problem or the question you framed was, BYOD and how should we look at it, right? So we look at it from three perspectives, right? The D part of it, like the devices first, right? And I agree with Mark, there's not just phones, it's tablets and anything that you can bring. And not only that, it's moving to, VDIs and thin clients, and, you got to manage the entire inventory of what anybody brings, right? So that's sort of the first problem to be solved. The second problem to be solved is not only is there multiplicity of devices, but there is the throughput going up per device, right? So with the 802.11 AC, 11 AC coming later this year and a gig to a desktop, the access of the enterprise or the desktop or the device is probably gig, right? Which means, there's a gig of throughput coming in, and then, depending on the oversubscription and all that, you got the campus core, right? So that's the second problem. And I think the third one, which is the architecture. How do you fit it all together? So I agree that there is a management intersection, but I don't agree that we have solved the problem as an industry. Wireless networks are still an overlay. On the Ethernet, yes, bits will be transported at the fastest, lowest cost, hit the ground as soon as possible, but we've not solved it. Okay?
So if I can just add to that. So I think management is critical, but I don't agree that wireless is still an overlay. So I think you have to treat, if the mobile edge is real, you have to offer the same experience over wired and wireless. So treating it as an overlay just does not work, especially with 11AC now shipping from Cisco and providing gigabit access over a wireless network. You have to terminate wireless at that first switch. You have to think about quality of service. When we brought voice to the network, we thought about resiliency with PoE. We thought about quality of service. If you're going to move to a mobile edge, yes, you need unified access. You need one management. You need one policy across wired and wireless. You also need to have one network that can deliver all the QoS control and security that you're expecting to offer that consistent user experience.
I happen to know these speakers personally as well, and I have to admit, I was wondering before we started the panel, would they be ever in a position to debate? But as you can see, there's some healthy debate going on here. Glad to see that. All right, so we've talked about the mobile edge. In the interest of time, let's look at the opposite end of the spectrum, if you will. Let's talk about the data center. Where are we with Ethernet in the data center today? And what problems have we addressed? And what are some of the frontiers from a data center and Ethernet standpoint? I think, Arpit, you're raring to go.
I can go. So I think data center architectures historically have been set up based on older workloads that were predictable, okay? Exchange, SAP, whatever. The IT admin knew exactly how to architect the data center. The newer workloads, right? The web workloads with Memcache or, storage replications, VDI, Hadoop, you name it, right? They're unpredictable, specifically around, even VMs and VMs moving around and server virtualization. When you don't have a predictable workload in a data center, your architecture needs to be flexible. And I think this is what is the heart of the problem today, where instead of, if I need to go to a person next to me in a hotel room on the same floor, why go down to the receptionist to find out he's on the same floor? That's what today's architecture is. You're going all the way to the core, aggregating versus distributing your switching and networking close to the VMs into as close to the servers as possible. So I think this is where it's heading. And then, of course, we'll all agree 30 gig, 10 gig, all those things. I don't think we need to debate that, right? I think we'll all agree.
Are you saying it's the capacity and the performance issues are taken for granted?
Taken for granted. Latency, performance, throughput, that's a given.
Okay, who wants to take him on?
I want to take a completely different take on this, which is today, the administrative expense in networking is really high. It's much higher than the cost of acquiring the actual infrastructure because it's all done by people, right? And just like there's Metcalfe's law, there's also Moore's law, right? And we know that computers and everything else is going to get twice as fast and cost half as much in the future. But the people who are doing all the administrative work, well, they're going to have a salary, and it goes up with inflation every year. But if we can automate things, we actually eliminate a lot of that. And there's some pretty cool stuff that we've actually demonstrated and we've filed patents on that do that today. And they do that for traditional network kit. And sometimes it doesn't have to be HPs, which ensures our customers have choice and flexibility. So this technology, virtual application networks, allows you to then start treating the network as though it's a set of pooled resources. You define what you need for an application, and it will automate the configuration of those resources. Access switches, core switches, routers, firewalls, IPSs. And it'll actually evaluate whether those services are there in place before you hit the go button to deploy them, so that you know that the reliability is there, that you can actually get the amount of bandwidth you need from the access layer, from the core layer. You can get the firewall services you need, and it takes that human middleware out. Our technology services people who stand up instances of Exchange for clients around the world all the time tell us to just deploy Exchange, very, very basic instance of Exchange, minimum 2 weeks. That's the time, the human middleware factor. That's very concrete. They've taken this technology and they've filed patents because they have seen it go to 5 minutes and deprovisioning in 7 minutes. And that's an innovation on top of Ethernet that will give great value to customers.
Steve, what's Juniper's view on where's the data center going vis-a-vis Ethernet?
Well, I'm going to disagree with both of the other speakers. Actually, I'm not, but I felt like I had to say that. So I think that we are in the middle of a war of bandwidth, density, and scale. And that war shows no signs of decreasing. I think, however, that the war will be won, again, at the management layer. Now, we see many claims of huge network scale, hundreds and thousands of servers. But the key question for me is actually how you make those deployable in a way that's easy to use, easy to manage, easy to deploy for the customer. So that, for me, is really where the war is being fought. Now, I did like the recent announcement from HP showing how they reduce from hours to minutes the configuration task by moving from the CLI to automated configuration. So that's good. The CLI is not an easy interface to use, and so I applaud that move. So the war will be fought on the, and that was a joke, the war will be fought on the management layer.
All right, Sachin.
So I agree the management layer is important, but there's innovations at just the Ethernet level that have been critical. And it is not a one-size-fits-all. So we find in a data center, you have low latency requirements for high-frequency trading. And if you innovate in silicon, like we have at Cisco, we're able to bring that down to a couple of hundred nanoseconds in terms of our capability to forward. If you think about creating overlay networks, you can innovate with OTV technology to create overlays, stitched together data centers. You can provide location independence with Lisp to make sure that the VM mobility that was being referred to before can be simplified. So we find that, yes, speeds and feeds will take their course depending on cost and power, probably two of the bigger drivers, but there's additional innovation that can be brought to the table to enable some of the trends that we're seeing in the data center.
Excellent. Well put, guys. Really appreciate your candid comments. Let me now, we've talked about two silos, both ends of the spectrum, the mobile edge in the enterprise network, and we've talked about what's happening at the core in the data center. Let me throw a little bit of a curveball and talk about a topic that's near and dear to many of us in the industry called virtualization. Very open-ended word, and I purposely have brought it into this discussion because there are differing views on how virtualization will impact networking. It has impacted servers, the compute function. It has impacted the storage world as well. And as you can see it, we live in a world where IT talks about desktop virtualization. They talk about application virtualization. And we live in a mobile world. You want to virtualize as much as you can because the power of compute in your hand is so great that you want to be thinking about it in a virtualized manner. All right, so now we've talked about how virtualization will impact networking. Let me ask the panel, what do you think of how virtualization sort of intersects with networking, intersects with Ethernet, and where do we go from here? Who wants to start? All right, Mike.
Everyone needs to take a turn at starting, right? So there's a couple things that Bob said early this morning that kind of made me think about things we're doing at HP that are very relevant to virtualization and requirements we see customers setting. One thing he said earlier today was about solving the problem with the rat's nest, and he also said the rat's nest is back. And it's kind of interesting that he said that because I kind of agree. And in the data center, one of the things we've seen with virtualization is it's actually caused all this additional network connectivity to servers because they're supporting all these different workloads. And we separated workloads in the past through physical air gaps. And so everybody wants their own port on the server. And that becomes untenable at a certain point. So actually dissolving network technology into compute allows you to have single big pipes that you then virtualize. You carve out channels that have that true separation, that true air gap, but virtually. And that eliminates a lot of the rat's nest. You get one cable that, that server supports different workloads in the future. You don't have to rewire it. You just reconfigure it through software. So we do that with Virtual Connect Flex Fabric. And the other thing I'm seeing is, just the virtualization has this new drive on traffic patterns. And, one of the things that Rohit's been saying is, the evidence says that, a huge percentage of the communication is actually machine to machine. And so I think that Arpit made that point that, why go to the front desk when you just know when you know what room to go to? Just take a direct trip to that floor in the hotel. So, this notion of traffic is east to west rather than north to south, and doing things to eliminate that latency by making a single big fabric that's layer 2 is, two things that virtualization's had as an impact on networking.
All right, Steve, you want to?
Sure. So to cut a long story short, the network has been getting in the way of virtualization. So we have to make the network invisible. That's certainly an interesting concept. But I think even more interesting is how virtualization is affecting the purchasing behavior and the decision-making group inside the data center. The networking team is in danger of becoming irrelevant. All of those Cisco CCIEs, their jobs are at risk. So we have to really, as networking vendors, make the network relevant again, but at the same time making it invisible, and at the same time as that, make it something that this new and emerging DevOps team actually cares about. So it's a multifaceted problem that we as a group have to address.
Okay, Sachin?
So I actually think the CCIE's, that career path is flourishing. I'm a CCIE myself. So now, with virtualization, you have to understand there's multiple phases to virtualization. We've touched on some of the aspects in data center. Again, this is an opportunity to innovate. Right? So if you've got virtualization happening in the campus, you can think about how you segment user groups. You can think about how you carry the rich context that BYOD provides at the access switch and use some sort of group tagging mechanism to create that to the network. You can think about virtual desktops and how the traffic patterns change for that. How do you insert real-time media and allow voice and video collaboration with virtual desktops to actually work? And again, in the data center, through innovations where we can provide location independence, we can provide overlay networks and virtualization through that, we can innovate so that we allow consolidation and provide simplicity with virtualization with its multiple phases.
Yeah, so I think my view is slightly different here, which is, whether CCI is relevant or not, whether CLI is the way of future or not, that's TBD. I think the most important thing is the requirements on networks just got even harder, okay? With all the virtualization, based on some of our modeling, we're getting to 25x today's bandwidth per rack, okay? So someone's got to switch and route and forward that traffic, okay? So it's a big problem. Secondly, as I said, east-west traffic, server to server, all these new workloads, right? Tremendous amount of traffic. And architecturally, I don't want to go up and build new networks based on old thinking of core and aggregation and top of rack and blade and servers and storage and things like that. As an admin, I want to look at newer technologies that push switching, down to servers, put it close to workloads, optimize the architecture for the specific workloads. A whole brand new set of technologies and switching is available. And by the way, they're all being presented in a server language, okay? GUI, point and click, Perl Python scripting. I was excited that Bob's taking that course or someone. It's just not. It's not a CLI world anymore. Let's face it, right?
Okay.
But the role of network does not diminish, right?
Great. Thank you for your insights. I also have to commend the panel. We've gone about 20, 25 minutes, and no one yet has uttered the word SDN. Believe it or not. That's great. Thank you. We've reserved that for tomorrow, and we agreed as a panel in our prep meet that, okay, we're going to make sure we. So since we are not talking about SDN, let's talk about network virtualization. All right, let me throw this out to you guys.
Getting really close there.
We're close.
Borderline.
We're playing with words here. I've seen incarnations of solutions that IT is looking at. Some of us call it as network as a service. You can use different folks use different jargon, but at the end of the day, it's some kind of as a service, IT as a service, or you can call it cloud-based service, but it does pertain to networking. So I'm not sure if the audience yet can draw the connections between network as a service and what does it have to do with Ethernet, and maybe it doesn't. If you might want to take maybe 60 seconds each and just give us your view. Where does this fit in the broader enterprise networking domain?
I think the way we look at it at Dell, right, is it is not about the networking function here, right? It is blending the line between server, storage, and networking software and applications in the data center, outside the data center, all the way to the clients, right? And the devices and the VDI. That is, you got to package it all. And then, of course, you peel out infrastructure as a service, right? Just separating out network and just saying, hey, go, I'll give you a few of these kind of, the VM type concepts on switching. That's not how we look at it, right? It's a full end-to-end IT view.
Okay.
Storage, server, networking, software solutions.
All right. Who wants to take a?
I think where we may be seeing some of this is when you have IT departments that are really acting like a service provider. So they're offering network services, they're offering data center services for different departments, and must be able to carve out resources and have some elasticity in their ability to do this. And so you do need to worry about network virtualization. You need to think about how you enable different VMs, how you move VMs, how you provide them on demand. And then I think the point that was being made earlier about how do you manage this so that carving and management of these resources by department is simplified. So I think those are some of the examples that we see, and some of the innovations that I've talked about really help IT deliver as a service provider internally.
Let me, I know we have literally just 5 minutes left before we open it up to at least a few audience questions, and I want to get some questions taken in for sure. So let me talk to each one of you guys and start with maybe Mike. Just take 90 seconds and give us your view of where you and HP see the networking industry as a whole going and what some of the challenges might be.
So I was actually going to say something about network as a service. We're all going to do that. I'll weave the two together.
Well, well, I mean, 30 seconds on the first one if you have a point,
yeah,
sure.
Gladly to do that.
Sure.
There's two things that whenever we talk to somebody, we always hear two different points of view around networks as a service. One is it a business model, and how do I want to use it as an enterprise? And from the business model perspective, and a lot of times what it's important to is the service provider who's oftentimes delivering these managed services to the client. And on the customer side, around how they want to consume things, the dialogue is often about, we don't have any IT staff anymore. We talked to one of the world's largest entertainment companies. They have 3 direct reports who work on their payroll that are responsible for the network. And to them, they rely on their service provider. And so we actually devised a model that allows for providers to deliver any kind of a solution, whether it's data center, campus, or branch, with our broad range of portfolio, but in a unique way that allows them to gain profitability immediately. But it delivers that customer the rich services that they want. Now, one of the things that becomes really important is I need to have the leading edge capability. I need that network to be connected better to the applications. And so the thing I talked about earlier, virtual application networks, is built on our single pane of glass management. So they actually are able to get a network that is dynamically provisionable. Remember, 5 minutes to provide services for exchange on a network. That's pretty phenomenal. So those are the kind of innovations that they see valuable to them that we're enabling a service provider to deliver. Now about HP, I mean, I can sum our strategy up in one word, and that's simplification. And as we think about delivering on that strategy to customers, one of the things we think about all the time, something Bob mentioned, which helped Ethernet win over Token Ring, and that's focusing on open standards, because that ensures customers have choice and flexibility. But the innovations that we deliver based on open industry standards focus on really 3 core values, which is not just to simplify the network, but to scale it and to automate it. So that way, as customers have more and more devices, as they get more and more endpoints that are become sensors in the network almost, they have something that scales, and they can actually administer that in a more automated way, eliminate the human middleware.
All right. Who wants to go? Steve?
I'll try and say that in a more punchy way, but I agree with it. The future is all about being open. Okay, so if you're a company out there, a networking professional, you want to have choice, you want to have flexibility moving forwards. So for me, it's all about working with vendors, sorry Cisco, that offer a very open platform that can integrate with anything. So to your point, you know, integration using Chef or Puppet or Python or OpenStack, these are all really, really good things. So I think if we can optimize the underlay, and I'm not going to use the 3 letters, if we can optimize the underlay and at the same time make it an open, optimized environment, then I think everyone will win, except for Cisco, sorry. Everyone will win in the customer base.
So on that note, I'd invite Sachin to come and talk to us.
Thanks, Rohit. So I think openness, and I think our participation in things like Open Daylight, our announcement of Cisco One architecture, open networking environment architecture, that where we're offering a platform development kit that supports OpenFlow as well. I think we're pretty clear that we support open standards. However, we also continue to believe that we need to innovate. And so we were the first to bring out Power over Ethernet, drive that to a standard. We brought out tag switching, drove MPLS as a standard. And so we will continue to do that and offer new Ethernet innovations that we push through the standards bodies. Now, having said that, the enterprise networking vision at Cisco is really to enable the Internet of everything. So we believe we're about connecting people, connecting clouds, and connecting things. And I do believe that IT is looking for simple, secure ways to do this that help them lower total cost of ownership. And so our strategy for this is quite simple. We're going to enable this with one management, single management platform, one policy for wired, wireless VPN for your entire access network, and one network. There is no overlay. We will offer an uncompromised user experience for wired and wireless. And as these new types of devices come on board, the new physical surveillance, smart grid, the new types of sensors that are coming on, there's going to be new requirements that we will innovate for and drive through standards at Cisco.
Great. Arpit, your 90 seconds.
All right. So first of all, let me sort of change the topic a little bit because, you know, open is like an open-ended word, right? How many of you have attended previous NetEvents? Just show of hands, right? So, you know, for those of you who are in Portugal, and you may have heard me say, 2012 was the year of 10 gig, right? And IDC numbers and some of the other analyst numbers show that, you know, tremendous penetration. We are getting to critical mass, and what I'm saying now, you know, from a Dell perspective as well, is this is the year of 40 gig, okay? And this is where we're going to see a lot more throughput coming in, you know, necessary. And, you know, I don't have stories from, you know, kilobits, but I'll tell you one of the stories where, you know, we were debugging, you know, 2 years ago the introduction of, you know, 40 gig technologies, right? And with our partner on the test equipments, right? And we didn't know because of the lower latency and the speed, where the problem was, right? So I think we're getting to a point where this is one of my first challenges, to the industry, right? That Dell wants to sort of address, right? Is the ecosystem needs to step up, right? The Ethernet ecosystem needs to step up. It's not just about the silicon that goes in it. It's not about the system vendors and the infrastructure that we built, right, as our peer companies. But the optics, the QSFP pluses, the cables, the NICs, right, the test equipment, you name it. Those, and there will always be a ping pong effect. So I think we want to make sure that we pull in the ecosystem along with it. By being open, by being interoperable, that's the only way we will get to, an optimized enterprise, as we call it at Dell.
Great, thank you. Okay, we are literally out of time, so we have a couple of mics, so if somebody has a question, looks like Bob has a question.
We are honored to have such 4 fine companies here with us today. I'd like to ask a sophisticated innovation marketing question, or I hope you take it that way. Around this time of afternoon, 40 years ago, the brand Ethernet was typed on a Selectric typewriter. And there's been some debate about what the word Ethernet means. Does it mean CSMACD on thick coax? Does it mean the packet format? Ethernet is prominent in the last 50 sentences you all uttered. What does Ethernet mean to you? That is, why do you use the word Ethernet in your language? What does that word mean now?
Well, a reporter asked me a question this morning, and I said to him that for the market as a whole, Ethernet represents something of confidence. That was the one word I summed up. And I think it was the panel this morning about Ethernet or Ethernot that reminded me of this, that there's been so many challenging technologies over the years, and Ethernet has demonstrated such a level of resilience because it's adapted to how people need it to change, to go from shared media to switched media where everybody's dedicated, to be able to move to the airwaves and to move to different physical media and support higher speeds over unshielded twisted pair that people didn't think was possible. And it's that adaptability and the adherence to open standards in order to meet the end user needs in the process that it's given people confidence. And it's a word, Ethernet's a word that just kind of resembles connectivity to everybody. My parents actually know what Ethernet is because the computers I gave them, I went to HP and bought them computers at an employee discount. That's how they connect everything. They understand that. And they think that 802.11 is just wireless Ethernet. And so it's a ubiquitous word that means I'm connected, and the ether kind of gives the notion that it's over any media.
Okay, yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, so from my perspective, right, I think it is a powerful brand that has, evolved into more of a generic statement, in marketing, right? So, we don't call, let's say, we don't call PCs Intel, right? But, the Intel processor is inside a PC, right? So that's how we have been using it as a term, right? Where you have switches with Ethernet, you got layer 2 switches, you got routers with Ethernet connectivity, both at the physical and at the protocol level. You got test equipment, you got all these devices, right? So it kind of implies a bigger thing for us, at least. It's not the specifics of, the actual definition you meant, right?
Right. Do we have any other folks with a question? All right, there's one here in the middle.
It's a cheeky comment, not a question. I mean, you could call yourselves Ethernet inside everything.
Yeah, Intel wouldn't like that.
Okay.
Technically, we do at HP. You buy Virtual Connect in a C-class server, you got Ethernet inside. We'll start marketing it that way.
Yeah, I think all of you might want to say something inside, each of our portfolios. But it's a good point. Certainly a good branding idea for sure. All right, I think with that, let me close the panel. I want to really thank the panelists for a really very, very, shall we say, debate-worthy panel. I really appreciate it. Thank you.